Now, Bohdan has extensive experience designing Strawbale buildings with a number of projects completed and in progress in South Australia. And he is also one of the founding members of Ausbale, which is a group dedicated to sharing information and success stories on Strawbale across Australia and New Zealand. And we're very honored to have someone of his caliber and his expertise here tonight to give us a download. So please, everyone, welcome Bohdan.
We've designed over 130 buildings in Strawbale. We have probably 70 to 80 that are built or in the process of being built. There is no great issue with building in Strawbale. Yes, we all know the story of the three little pigs. Yes, the wolf, the big bad wolf, didn't really blow the house away. We haven't had any of our houses blown away as yet, and we have had quite a number of wolves coming around. They're called building inspectors, planning inspectors, health inspectors, etc. But no, we seem to get away with it. The history of Strawbale is quite interesting because it started off in Nebraska, and in Nebraska it's a grass plain. There are no real building materials, there are no timber type of materials around, so it was something where wheat grew. And it was the design or building of the first baling machine that actually made these big bricks, the big Lego bricks made out of wheat bales. And then they must have put them together and thought, this is rather warm and cosy. But of course, straw rots if it hasn't got render or some sort of finish on it, so they decided to put some mud over it. And they found, wow, these are really great buildings. So it started off around the 1900s, so there's buildings there since the 1900s, and I'll show you a couple of the buildings in a minute. While I was in Colorado a few years ago, we had to it was a conference, and I was talking about Australian systems of building, etc. over there, and we had a bale that was there that had come out of a building that was built in the 1920s, and the straw bale itself was as golden as it was when it was put in. So it's sort of a nice feeling to know that straw bale doesn't go black and rotten if it's designed correctly, etc. Around about 1970s, in Australia it was revived, and it didn't really start in Adelaide until about 2000 or 2001. It comes from a baling machine. Now this is a baling machine. This is the guy that we use up north near Roseworthy, and basically first of all, it's not hay, it's straw. So the straw, the wheat is cut, and then what's left is the stalks. Now what's been happening over the years is a lot of the stalks were burnt, so it was a waste material. And then basically, by turning it into a bale, it becomes a building material or becomes a material that horses sleep on, etc. They don't eat straw; they eat hay because hay has got seeds, etc. in it. These are some of the houses in the 1920s. So you can see that on the left-hand side, just a little sort of normal little house, whereas on the right-hand side, it's a bit more spectacular. That's now, I think, the Radio Museum I think it's in Nebraska. So you can see that Strawbale doesn't have to have a particular design, because what you've got is a material which is rendered, so you can do anything you want with a render, with a plaster that you put on the outside. You can make it look whatever you like. So as I said before, straw bales are a waste product of the agricultural industry. That's following harvesting. Bales are usually around about, and I'll put down 95 centimetres mainly because I couldn't fit 950 millimetres in that line. So it's 95 by 45 by 35. That's kind of the rough size of the bale. So the actual wall thickness is the 45 mil. They weigh around about 80 to 20 kilograms, and usually there are about 200 in the construction of a house, roughly. It's very hard to know how many there are. So when you kind of work out, 20 kilograms by 200 bales, you end up with about 2,000, is that right? 4,000 kilograms, which is quite a lot of sort of carbon stuff that you're putting back and encasing it in some render. Straw bales have a really high R value. They rate from between 6 to 7, which is not too bad. believe it or not, when they're laid on the edge, they have a slightly better R value. They've got really good acoustic properties. Has anybody ever stayed in a Strawbale house? Been in a Strawbale building? And what do you think? Isn't it kind of a lovely feel that you have in the Strawbale house? It's kind of got a soft feel about it. The walls seem to act as Helmholtz resonators, and they sort of accept the noise and they don't reverberate as much. So they've got really lovely acoustic properties. We've designed a studio for a metal band, and also rendered bales of fire resistant. So we had some tests done back in 2002, and they achieved some bushfire resistance. We're now sort of progressing to go to a Bale 40 rating, and also the Germans have tested it to, I think it's about 90 minutes of fire. So with a render on the Strawbale, they're quite good. And the last thing, no, cows won't eat it. They don't like straw, believe it or not. And mice, they might make a home during construction, but after they're rendered, and there's usually 3 coats of render on the Strawbale, so there's no way that the mice are going to get in there and inhabit it. And if they do, then they just sort of turn into little skeletons. And yes, no big bad wolf will not blow the house over, really it won't. We've got an engineer there, and he designs them to withstand cyclones. There are several methods of construction. One is load bearing, and this is the traditional, if you buy the American Strawbale books, you'll see load bearing. Load bearing is not a good way of doing things, believe it or not, because you have to put all the walls up, you have to load the walls down, and then you put the roof on. And no matter when you do it, it's going to rain and your bales are going to get wet. So we've, through experience, found that load bearing is not really a great way to go in construction. Post and beam seems to be the way that we've done it, and I'll take you through some slides of just basic construction. Hybrid is combining a bit of load bearing. Usually load bearing, if it's an internal wall, that might do some load bearing, but you're always relying on the bales to take some load, and sometimes bales vary in their density, in their strength, in their composition, in their size. So it's always a kind of a bit of a game that you play with them. So our preference as an architectural firm is to do something that's going to be a house that's going to stand up, withstand all the forces that nature can give, hopefully, and then make sure that the Strawbale is well insulated, well rendered, and well waterproofed. So basically, I'll take you through this very simply. You start off with a foundation, and then usually it's a post and beam. So the posts go in first. Then you put on the beams and the roof structure. So on the left-hand side, the roof structure is put on. Then on the right-hand side, we put the roof covering on. So basically what you've got is a carport structure. So you can work under the roof, you can store your bales underneath without any problems of the bales getting wet and possibly the mice getting in. Then basically you then insert the bales in between the posts. Following that, you render the bales, so that it's a 3-coat render, so it takes probably a few, depending on how warm it is and what the weather is, etc. It probably takes a couple of weeks between coats, and then you sort of finish off the construction. I believe there's a Q&A question. If there's any questions, please ask them at the Q&A. Is that right? Yeah, thanks again. After both of us present. Here's a photograph or a slide of a workshop. So quite often it's something where a bunch of people can get together and help raise the walls, as they used to say. Hallelujah, we're raising the walls. And you can see the kind of structure. This is a butterfly type roof. So the box gutter is in the middle between the 2 walls. The posts are up. There's cross bracing between the posts there, so you can see that. And I'll just get on to the next slide. So you can see the cross bracing. So that's basically to stop the walls from racking while the roof's on. So basically, so the building doesn't sort of sway. And I'm sure Gerald, if you grab Gerald, he'll probably tell you there's some other reasons for it as well. You'll see at the bottom, at the slab, there's a plinth. So in this case, the plinth is made up of a timber frame with some gravel in there. And that's so that you lift the bales above the floor. So if there's any flooding in the floor, the water won't go into the bales, and if water and bales get together, they form a black sludge, which is really quite unhealthy and it's quite smelly, and the walls could collapse. So the bales go above that. So we try and make the bales about 100 mil or so above the floor level. And the gravel is not for water to penetrate, it's actually for the bales to sit on. So if water gets into the bales to a point where it's actually dripping through the bales into that gravel, you have big problems with it. You see that in between the to the right of the cross bracing, there's a big beam, so that's a lintel, so there's a window going in there. So usually it's a similar construction to what you would have in a standard house. So you still have the walls that are supporting the roof, and there's lintels that support the walls above the windows. So it is a standard form of construction. There's just on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of detail on that little section that lifts the bales above. And on the right-hand side, you can see the bales. They've been put in up against that cross bracing. And wherever there's a post, you become an expert in chainsawing. So you chainsaw the bits out of the bales so you can poke the bales up against there quite neatly. There's that slide looks the same as the other one. But on the right-hand side, it's now been pretty well baled up. And the next thing is that the bales have got all these little flicks of hay or straw that come out. I said hay again, didn't I? So little bits of straw. So when you don't want the little bits of straw poking out through the render. So just giving them a shave with a whipper snipper is a good way to go. So the walls have just been sort of given a shave, number one. And then when it's ready, you can see that on the right-hand side, there's not too many stalks or bits of straw poking out of the walls. And that's Lance, our Strawbale wall builder. He's just showing people how to render. So just trying different colours, etc. So it's really a good fun time where you sort of do some rendering. And I'll go to some samples now. And as I said, in terms of any technical stuff, etc., Strawbale is one of those materials and so on that has been tested, prodded, etc. for the last 50 years. And there are probably something like 50 to 60 different tests that have been done all over the world, from acoustic to moisture to fire rating to load bearing to etc. etc. So there's a lot of testing that has been done on Strawbale and Strawbale construction. This is a house in Malala that we designed some time ago, and it just shows the nice curvy walls, lots of recycled materials used there. From the outside, we sort of looked at this, and it's kind of like we're architects, so we're not builders, so we're architects, so we kind of look at it and think, how are you going to make a comfortable house at Malala? And the clients really didn't want to influence us at all, and what we thought would be a good idea was to look at the principle of the courtyard. So we thought that, in warm climates, and Malala gets up to 40, 45 degrees, and having a courtyard somehow seems to work. And to our worst surprise, we found that the prevailing cooling breezes came from the west, which is really great, it's a great orientation for cooling breezes. So we did have one or two windows on the west, and we kind of funneled the cooling breezes, which came as a sea breeze, so it was in the afternoon. So the trees to the left did do some protection. I haven't got all the slides on this, but they created a nice garden to the west, so it did cool down the house as well. But we funneled it down a corridor, and that actually worked really well. So you have to work, as an architect, you have to work with orientation and the microclimate as it comes along. So this house actually really worked well for the clients. This is a house we did at Bordertown, so it was just, this is all mud render walls. So the interesting thing about the client is he was a mechanical engineer, and he had a lot of internal walls as thermal mass walls, and he did those in handmade mud bricks. And what he did within the joints of the mud bricks, he had some tubes of hot water that he created. So basically, during winter, where it gets probably below zero, the walls actually acted as a radiator. So the walls were, rather than being heated by wood fires or whatever, he actually had hydroponics type system through there, and it worked really well. So that was something that, you know, each owner builder has an expertise that they use, and in this case he used that. So it was a really interesting project to be involved with. This is at Loxton, so there's another Strawbale house, north orientation. It's quite pleasing. Sometimes as an architect you kind of doubt yourself that, you know, there's no figures about comfort, and we were talking with Clara earlier on. There's no such thing as saying, oh, because it's got a 9-star rating, this house is going to work really well. I mean, have a look at the houses that are being built currently by, you know, all the Fairmont homes who, you know, achieve the 6 stars, and the houses are not very nice to live in. And in this case, we always sort of think this is the way it's going to work. Will it work well? And it's interesting. I had an email from this client, and she said, "Oh, I took my kids to school and went back, and I love sewing apparently." And she was in a sewing room and worked away, no air conditioning at all. And then when she went to pick up the kids at 3:30, opened the front door, she couldn't believe how hot it was. So the house had worked really well in terms of comfort. I think we only achieved about, I don't think we had it rated at the time. If it did, it probably would have been, a 7-star or something. So I'm sure that people that do house rating probably understand what I'm talking about. Again, it doesn't have to be houses. This is a winery, so this is a biodynamic winery at Mount Barker. So the client wanted to create a couple of areas using Strawbale. This is probably one of the early houses that I did. This is at Consett Creek. And houses don't have to be small either. And what we really encourage is for people outside of our community to look at energy efficient housing, etc. So we would like to take this out to the real world, to all the world, not just to have brick veneers and etc. We'd like, you know, people that have lots of money build houses and tell people how wonderful they are, so we can build houses everywhere, all over the world. So this was a house on the Murray, and you can see we looked at using, that faces north, so it has achieved some really nice comfortable situation and used a lot of stone for thermal mass and so on. Just a side elevation, I always like that one, I've got that on my computer. Nice photograph. Inside was quite pretty. So, yeah, they're houses that the rich live in. Now, also, there are other issues when designing houses that we've found. So, for example, this was in the Barossa Valley, and to any architects and designers that are here, it's really important to look at what the microclimate is. Now, in this particular case, the client said to us, "It actually snows here." I went, "What? Barossa Valley? Does it snow in the Barossa Valley?" "Yep." And we get our winds and we get our very cold winds from the west. So I went, right, okay. So where you can see that curved wall, I'm not sure if I got more photographs. I didn't want to sort of pile this with lots of photographs, but that's the Strawbale wall, and it kind of goes around the back of the house right through to the back. So that was our Strawbale wall to stop all the very cold breezes and the cold air coming through. And we just used the very thick timber frame wall that was well insulated, and the roof was well insulated. And underneath that deck, there's I think it's a 20,000 or 30,000 litre concrete water tank. And that tends to keep that's the thermal mass. And it keeps the house in wonderful sort of temperature. And this particular winemaker is fairly well known. I won't mention his name, but he does a lot of winemaking around the world. And after he came back to the house, he said to me, do you know, I go around the world and I stay in all these places, but when I get there, I really love it. It's like, you know, going on a holiday, so it's really pleasing. Oh, that's the back of it. You can see the Strawbale wall returning around. And again, it doesn't have to be houses. For example, this is a fit out for a physio type of room. So it was a warehouse scenario, and the clients bought a section of a warehouse, and they wanted some quiet spaces between the treatment rooms. So we did some walls in Strawbale and some other natural materials, and that's kind of like inside one of the rooms. So you can see the Strawbale walls in between, and then where the light comes through, we just kind of created a box above as a mezzanine with natural light coming through. So it sort of created a fairly nice ambient sort of area for many physio sessions that I went to. Yeah. An architect's body is never very good. This is a house down at Coffin Bay, and I think it just shows a scenario of what you can do with a Strawbale wall. You can actually gouge it, you can sculpt it, etc. So these guys decided to form a little niche in that wall, and also I guess it shows a few things, like shows the tiles which act as a thermal mass. It shows the wall around the heater, and that has a wetback, so it ends up helping with the heating of the solar hot water services they've got on the house, etc. So it's just, you know, shows a few nice little sort of aspects of designing without it costing lots of money. Again, a hand-built house. I mean, I love the hand-built houses. This is a carpenter at Streaky Bay, and he milled the timber. He went out, cut the timber, milled the timber, dried the timber. Gerald lovingly designed his trusses, and he built the house. And it's a Strawbale house, and unfortunately, he built the top section first. So he had this heavy weight sitting on his columns, and he rang Gerald and myself one day and said, "The house, it sways." I said, "What? Why does it sway?" He said, "Well, what have you done?" "Oh, we put the straw bales on top, we thought it'd be the way to go." So, okay, build a lower wall, see what happens. Anyway, he's been really happy with it. It hasn't swayed since. And he's used that Solomon ceiling, so basically it's a straw type ceiling that you can see up there. So, and as I said, he's very clever with his hands. He's a carpenter by trade, so you can see the really very careful, neat work that he's done. This is, again, for example, in a kitchen, there's no reason why in the kitchen you can't have a couple of niches and put your cooking books there. This is just an addition to a house, and it was interesting to see, to see the niches and what you can sculpt in a wall. There's a little two-storey house at Kangaroo Island. So these guys, probably in their 60s, decided to subdivide their block and build the little Strawbale two-storey house. And the most interesting story about it is that their little doggy had arthritis when he moved into the Strawbale house. Hallelujah, there's no more arthritis. And they swear that it's the Strawbale house. So it's a true story, but they told me this, and they asked me to mention it to everybody that has a little doggy that's got arthritis. I've called the RSPCA, they don't believe me. This is what you can do with a Strawbale house. You can sort of add colour to it through windows, etc. So that's just Lance's house. And I think this is the last slide. And this is just a house that was recently completed by a builder. So what we're finding now is that the owner builders are finding it difficult to find the time to build the houses, because it does take a reasonable amount of time, and they're going to build constructors. So they're going to a main contractor who does all the work, and then they employ subcontractors. So there's, instead of having a bricklayer, you have a Strawbale builder, if you like. So this house achieved an 8-star rating, which we thought was good, because when we were approached, they had a river gum home that had a 7.5, and they said, "Can you beat that?" And I said, "I don't know, I suppose so." So we gave it a go. So anyway, we beat it by half a star. And if we'd done something else, we would have got, I think, 9 stars. But I don't understand all this jazz. I just, sort of... it was at 8.5. Can you see up there? Just below Pro 4.5 in that red writing. It wasn't 8.5 stars. Maybe they just can't colour the star in half. So anyway, we beat Rivergun by a star, so I thought that was good. So we created sort of, windows that let the heat out through by having higher level windows, ceiling fans, etc. It's got a nice feel about it. So I think that, in terms of materials, Strawbale does offer a lot in comfort. So, but also it does offer a lot in terms of the energy rating that we have in terms of, that's a NatHERS certificate. I guess my sort of view is that we shouldn't be just talking about Strawbale, but natural building materials. There are too many materials that have high embodied energy, and yet, the aerated concrete is supposed to be a green material, yet look at the footprint that it creates. It doesn't. We were talking earlier about eco bricks, and we were talking earlier about lots of other eco green building materials, and the amount of energy that's required to reconstitute those materials into a new building material really is as bad as the material that was that it compares to. So anyway, I'll finish on that note. Am I over time or under time or? Thank you very much.